All right, everybody ready? Okay, since you know who I am, I'm going to introduce Ian from Monarch Plastisol Company. And what we want to show you guys is we do get along, you know? Water-based and Plastisol. And we're going to show you guys a nice little hybrid way of printing today. So first, I'll let Ian kind of take over and talk a little bit more about Plastisol. And then I'll just kind of wrap it up on how we're going to use Discharge in conjunction with Plastisol and print today. Okay? Cool.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I'm Ian from Monarch. How many of you are familiar with Monarch Plastisinks? Cool. Yeah, 1, 2, pretty much everybody. All right. So we actually started, you can go to the next slide, Jesse. We actually started in commercial printing inks for offset and flexo. That's how Monarch basically got started in 1977. From there, we developed UV LED inks, kind of went with the industry. We did that for about 30 some odd years before we eventually decided to step into the apparel decoration arena. And we got into that selling to Nike, Under Armour, Adidas. We were doing their hang tags, printing for those, and we got an opportunity to kind of get in there and print some of their back neck labels, just white heat transfer. So that's how we got into the apparel decoration. From there, we decided, hey, you know, let's make some Plastisol inks. Let's see what we can do here. So in 2016, we started the research and development process of making Plastisol inks. It took us a full year to launch our first line of inks, which were all low temp inks. That's how we got started. We didn't start with standard cure. We started with low cure, which unfortunately was probably not really the way to go because that's one of the more difficult inks to formulate correctly. Go to the next one. Today, we have a full line of screen printing inks. We have everything that we make is available in standard cure temp and low cure temp, and everything will be consistent. Your formulas will be the same if you have our mixing system. The whites will look the same. Everything will be identical. You'll have some slight viscosity, changes going to low temp. Low temp inks tend to be a little bit thicker than a standard cure temp ink. That's just unfortunately something that's difficult to get away from. We have our ULT3, which is the only ink that's not available in standard cure temp and low cure temp. Sure, you can cure ULT3 at standard temp, but if you're using ULT3, 270 cure, you're printing on polyester garments. You don't want to exceed that 270-degree cure. That's when the dyes in the fabrics reactivate, gas off, and you have dye migration. So that ink is exclusively designed for 100% polyesters. The Apocalypse series is a low temp ink that can also be cured standard temp, 280 and 320. Vivid series is exclusively standard cure temp. That goes on 100% cottons, 50/50s. Don't really want to put that on 100% polyester. And we have a full line of 100% cotton low temp inks and standard cure temp inks. So recently, we've kind of gotten into making all of our inks available in standard cure temp and low cure temp because people do 100% polyester, 50/50, little bit of 100% cotton. You don't want to be having to change drier temps in that. If you're doing something that's outside of the normal scope of your work, we want to make an ink that fills in without you having to change much of what you're doing in your shop. We also have a line of PVC-free ink. So Jesse was talking about water-based being PVC-free by nature, of course. It's called PVC-free Plastisol. That is, that's a misnomer. It's not a Plastisol because it's not a plastic. It's PVC-free. That's a great option for people who want to, offer a solution, an eco-friendly solution, or have to pass, material restricted substance list that Jesse had talked about prior. It's downside of it. Wet on wet printing is a lot more difficult with it. It's more expensive to run PVC-free than a traditional plastic. But it's, it gives you that option to do something that a lot of other people aren't doing. And, no offense to water-based, you don't have to change your process. This plugs right in. You can leave it open in the screen. You can treat it exactly how you would treat a plastic ink when you're printing, and you're going to get exactly the same result. So screen printing today, I mean, when we first got into it, which really wasn't even that long ago, people were printing, standard was 156 mesh, printing white down. That's what everybody did, the underbase. Now people are pushing those to, they want to print 230 underbases. So people want to go as high as 305 underbases. Some people were doing 110 mesh on 100% polyester inks. All that is changing, and for good reason. People want better results on their fabrics. They want to give the customer something that feels good, that is smooth. It is not, crazy film weight. You don't want to give something to somebody who feels like they're wearing a piece of cardboard on the front of their garment. So people are pushing the envelope, trying to advance the industry to give better products to their customers, and that's where the hybrid printing comes in. Jesse will go over it a little bit more as well, but it's designed really to achieve a softer hand and a thinner print on your garments. Using a discharge or water-based underbase doesn't give you the film weight that a traditional Plastisol will, and you can build images on top of that without resulting in something that's that thick that your customer is wearing. There's some downsides, like Jesse mentioned before. Everything that you do for water-based tends to be different than what you do for Plastisol. So you have to keep that in mind when you go set up a press and you have a single press that's running both water-based, discharge, and then Plastisol on top. Water is the poison to Plastisol. It will cause you to fail wash tests. It will cause it to break down, and you might not see it until it gets to the customer and they wash it a few times and the image falls off. Most of the time they're going to come back to you and complain and tell you, hey, you need to fix this. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they say nothing, and the next time they take their business elsewhere because you didn't even know that this happened. So when we're on press over there, and we'll show you guys, discharge, you want to really get all of that moisture out before you start stacking Plastisol on it. You do not want to trap any moisture underneath the Plastisol because it will start to break down and it will start to come apart, and it will not take very long at all. So make sure if you do discharge, water-based, underbase, you're evaporating all of that moisture out of that discharge or water-based, underbase before you start stacking Plastisol on top of it. So when doing hybrid printing, and what we'll see over here, we're doing a simulated process. So we're basically doing 12 colors, one of which is the underbase discharge. So 10 PMS colors, trapping black. As obviously most of you guys probably know, it's very important to use high mesh count when you're doing simulated process or 4-color process. You want to be 230 or above. Most of what we have over there is 305. There's a couple 230s. The SEPs came back with 230s. I'm not really sure why, but we just rolled with it. Should be fine. Color order is also important, so that's what we'll be doing here shortly, is going over and looking at the way the job is set up. So like I said, Graphic Source did the SEPs for us. They did a great job. They're awesome. I need to make sure that they're in the correct order because that's going to be very important when doing wet on wet printing. You typically obviously want to save your highlight whites for last. We don't have a highlight white on this job, but we do have a trapping black. I tend to like to flash right before a trapping black just to lock everything in when you put the black on top of it, but some people just kind of leave it open and just let the black do the work. You don't want light colors on top of, if you have a super light color, you want to save that to the end if you have a flash because, over time, the back of the screen is going to get a little more ink on it, as it goes up, and you don't want to muddy those, highlight whites or, lighter colors with other colors, some of the darker colors. So making sure that you're working with your art department to know your color setup, your color arrangement is extremely important because the art department's just going to get, well, I'm pulling this out, this is the order I like, here you go. So just make sure if you're doing the art, you keep that in mind. If you have an art department, you're talking to them about that, making sure that you're in the correct color order, you like everything the way it's set up, and just make sure that, the order is good because that'll really, if you have a lot of buildup on the back of the screen, you're gonna have to stop, wipe everything down, like Jesse was talking about. That's labor, that's cost, that's time that you've just wasted doing that when you could just be banging out shirts if you just had the correct color order. So this is kind of what we talked about before. What you're doing here is trying to achieve the softer hand without, good coverage, softer hand, lower film weight, giving yourself, the opportunity to, when you have 12 colors, you don't end up with what feels like a 12-color thick print. You've got halftones that you're managing on top of this that kind of gets rid of that film weight too because you're not stacking anymore. You're just basically the only thing you're stacking is the trapping black. Everything else is just kind of filling in those gaps, and you've got the halftones there, so it really gives you the ability to do, and it takes you a step further when you do simulated process versus 4-color process. So we have a lot of customers who do 4-color process, and you can build just about any image out there with 4-color process. The problem is you're going to lose some of the resolution, some of the color definition, whereas simulated process, when you're running 8, 10, 12 colors, you can get super photorealistic images that look great, feel great, everything is awesome, especially when you use a discharge or a water-based underbase. So we got into this industry that's dominated by some of the biggest now companies out there. We are the small guy. We're still the small guy, and we have to do things a little bit differently. We've got to innovate our inks. We've got to make things better. We've got to respond to customers. Every customer who buys Monarch ink has a direct line of communication with me. You can send me an email. You can give me a call. If you have problems, I'll try to figure it out for you over the phone. If I can't, we'll do a video call. If I can't do it then we'll try to get somebody out on site to take care of you guys, because we're trying to respond to what you all want to do. So the best thing that we can get is feedback. Hey, I tried this and it didn't work. How do I improve this? Or what can you do to make this better? Hey, I've got this crazy idea. I want to try something like this. Okay, let's give it a shot. We'll do research and development internally and say, hey, this is something that can be done, or no, well, we don't recommend doing it this way. So that's how we kind of want to differentiate ourselves from some of the bigger suppliers, manufacturers out there, is try to do things for you guys, try to be responsive, try to understand what you're looking for and do the best that we can to provide a solution for you guys, because if we don't, we're just another Me-Too product and you guys don't care, you try it, nobody responds to you, you're done, you move on to whatever's next. So that's what we want to do, that's what Monarch is, and like I said, I'll be here all day today and all day tomorrow. I wish I could sit here and give you guys, all this information on how to make Monarch or whatever work at your shop and how to get your solutions, but everybody's different. Everyone's setup is different. You could have 2 of the same presses in 2 different cities, exact same settings, and somehow you're going to get a different result. And that's one of the challenges being a manufacturer, is being able to respond to all those differences, because the ink is basically the last line of defense. The ink is required to make up for anything that happened beforehand, any issue that popped up beforehand. Whether it's your garment, whether it's your pre-press, whether it's the art. Every time I get a call, hey, the ink's not working. Okay, well, let's step back and let's walk through the whole process and see where we can find a failure point before we determine that, hey, the ink isn't actually working, which, everybody has problems, and every once in a while we'll send out a bad batch of ink, and, we own up to it and replace that. So, yeah, that's what we're all about. And now I'll kind of open it up to Jesse and I kind of going over exactly what we're going to show you guys over here with hybrid printing.
Hello. No. Where did I lose it?
Oh, it's working.
Wow. So, as you can all see, and this is the first time I'm actually doing this, and Ian and I happen to have a booth very close to each other in Long Beach, and the first time I met Ian was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we've become very good friends in just such a short period of time, and I'm a firm believer, very similar to what Jesse's doing in the printing side, that we all have to collaborate, okay? Even though we're different type of ink solutions, if there is a hybrid solution that can help you get started to improve, this is some of the conversations we've been having about how to work together, test our products together to make sure they are compatible with each other, okay? That's something we don't do in our industry as vendors, okay? When they make these LED light sources and the emulsion manufacturers, they don't talk to each other to see if it's going to be compatible. So you run into problems, and then they figure it out later on and have to work extra hard, to try to make it compatible. Everything that Keith talked about again this morning is very important. I can't emphasize that enough. I work with Keith as well to make sure that our products are compatible with his emulsion. Again, if emulsions are breaking down, we get blamed for everything. So I, as well as Keith, cannot have that. So we try to collaborate and work together. I send him samples. I send his technical team samples so they can test our inks with their emulsions to make sure they're working properly. So we're trying all this. So just to conclude here what we're going to do with the hybrid printing, and something I want to add on there. Earlier I said Plastisol has dot gain, water-based has dot loss. Something to take into consideration when you're using Discharge as an underbase, okay? Because you might lose some detail somewhere along the line, okay? So when you're doing your separations, take that into consideration as far as your dots, okay? And how to either compensate for those dot losses that you might get, because water-based might hold better detail on the emulsion that you can't hold when you're printing Plastisol, okay? So just something to consider. So when you print it and you see like you're losing something or you're gaining something, you got to compensate for that. And the more you do it, you'll start doing it naturally, okay? Jeff from Stampinator, I just found out today, he's a really good separator, you know, and I don't think we have anybody talking about separations. So I'm going to, since you're here, I'm going to take advantage of that. I think it's important to talk to somebody who has separation experience as well, and kind of pick their brains on that as well. When it comes to the Discharge underbase, it is important, very important, and I had a question earlier, to use a correct mesh count, okay? We are used to using open mesh with Discharge, 110, 160, okay? Same thing with underbasing, Plastisol or underbasing high solids. We use 110s, 160s. With Discharge, it is very important to use 200 and above. I recommend 230, okay? Reason being, and like Ian just said right now, is that we need to evaporate that moisture as quickly as possible so it does its chemical reaction and we get the humidity out of there so it doesn't affect the performance of the Plastisol going on top. Very, very important. If you do not remove that humidity, it's going to contaminate the Plastisol and it is going to affect the performance, okay? Meaning it can shift colors or it can cause the Plastisol to crack, okay? So we are kind of playing with fire here, but it works when done properly, and it's a great solution to soften up the hand, okay? Another option that you could consider is using a high solid acrylic, okay? We've recently been playing with using just regular water base as an underbase, because you can't always use Discharge. Not all the fabrics are going to accept or be compatible with the Discharge solution. So now we have the option of using our underbase blockers with a high solid acrylic or a medium solid acrylic as an underbase. It's still water base for Plastisol. For whatever reason, and I'm not a chemist, you know, you can print water base or Plastisol on top of water base, but you can't print water base on top of Plastisol. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it's working out, okay? I've been trying to find that answer, but it's important that you understand that, okay? On the Discharge side, we're going to use a Discharge. I got two options back there. I have a straight Discharge base, just natural base, which makes the color of the shirt, which is natural, it's like an off-white, be exposed so you can put the plastic colors on top. So it's not like you're printing on a white t-shirt, it's more like you're printing on a natural t-shirt. But because Plastisol has a little bit more opacity, it works. It covers it enough to show those colors. If the Plastisol is a little bit transparent and needs some opacity, you can add a Discharge white to the base, but never print it at 100%. Okay, you cannot print 100% white Discharge as an underbase for Plastisol or water base. Okay? Reason being is Discharge is designed to get softer when you wash it. And that happens because the resin and some of the pigments are washed out. So it gives you more of a vintage look. So Discharge is a good solution if you're looking for a vintage look. That's where a lot of people use Discharge. And like I said earlier, we do have some Discharge products that will wash better and maintain the color. So it's just knowing which Discharge is the correct option to use for the different scenarios that you need to use it, okay? So the maximum Discharge white that you can add to a base, to underbase Plastisol, we've said 50-50, but I like to play it safe, and I would say 60-40. 60 of the base, 40 of the white is the maximum that I would recommend you attempt to use as an underbase. My favorite is 80-20. 80 base, 20 white. That's been my go-to for a very long time now. Okay? The mesh counts, very important. You know, if somebody says it's drying too fast, we got to find out why and not just drop the mesh count because we feel it's going to stay open. Because what's going to happen is you're adding more moisture and it's going to take longer to evaporate that moisture out of it. So the more you lay down, the longer you're going to have to flash it, the longer it's going to take for you to print. Does that make sense? Cool. Did I miss anything?
Just one thing to mention. So discharge underbase, when we flash decent amount of time, more than Plastisol is required. So you're going to get hot pallets pretty quick. So
he just reminded me right now, Ian reminded me that we also have to preheat our pallets. Very important. Okay, we want to get those pallets to about 130, 140 degrees Fahrenheit because those heated pallets combined with the flash will help the water evaporate quicker. It's also going to help the Plastisol when you're printing wet on wet to start drying it so it doesn't start building up behind the screens a little bit. Okay, we're not going to hit the gel point, you know, but it's going to be warm enough to where it's getting close to that gel point. That's going to help it print wet on wet.
On that point, I was going to ask, when you mentioned you got to evaporate all the water, how does that base layer? That has to be done like on the press with a flash or a stamp or a Plastisol coat on top.
Yes. So
On top, whatever's left in there is going to the customer.
no, so it's not gonna evaporate 100%. You're not gonna get all the moisture out of there. You need to get majority of the moisture out. So you're gonna be about 85% of moisture removal on there, and you're gonna get that from the flash and from the hot pallets. It's gonna continue to evaporate while it's going there.
So when you throw it in the dryer afterward, that's still taking more moisture out of it.
Very minimal amount.
Very little.
Very minimal. Very, very minimal. Because there's going to be moisture already in there, you know, so it's just going to remove the rest of it. Okay.
Much moisture in the flash or a stamp after that first screen before you start to put Plastisol on top.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you want to evaporate. You want to see the image. You want to see the image pretty much at about 85% of the image. That's how you know most of it has evaporated out. Okay. And it is going to be a weaker. It will be a weaker product if you leave moisture on there. Okay. But at the end of the day, you know, it depends on the standards that the customer is willing to accept. What we're trying to achieve is a softer hand. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to achieve. I'm sure Ian and I both would probably say, don't do it that way. You know, this is, I think, just another option to soften up the hand before you start getting into 100% water base, or you start getting softer Plastisols or basing down the Plastisol. Because when you start basing down any ink, you're messing with the properties of the ink. So we're just trying to find other ways to help you bring that hand down and be softer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's important to note, if you use low temp inks, your gel temp is going to be much lower than a standard cure temp ink. So that's just, I mean, it can be done, but that's something that needs to be factored into your process. If you're using Discharge, you're getting those pallets warm, and you're also using low temp inks to complete the job, you could start to run into some gelling issues with the Plastisol pretty quickly.
Low temp inks, higher viscosity?
Typically.
Yeah. So same thing with water base. Lower viscosity will take longer to flash. Higher viscosity will be quicker to flash on the water base side. Cool. Hey, finished on time, pretty much.
Cool.
Any questions about what we're going to be doing? No? You guys want to see a print, huh?
Yeah.
Don't believe it till you see it. I get it.
When you guys mentioned softer feel, right, does it dull the Plastisol? Because a lot of my clients want to buy it.
So he's asking if the discharge underbase to achieve a softer feel dulls the Plastisol on top. No, I mean it doesn't really. I mean the Plastisol, basically this is just creating another sort of underbase, and it does create a softer hand, but it maintains the same level of gloss or the same what you would produce with a normal Plastisol print.
Yeah.
There are things that you can add if you have customers. Everybody seems to be pushing towards matte. Everybody wants more things to be matte. We have matte additives. I'm sure you guys have matte additives for your inks as well. That's a good way to get a soft hand, a matte finish, get rid of that gloss, but the Plastisol will still act like Plastisol on top of the underbase.
So something that I left out earlier, and I think Ian will agree with me as well, whether it's Plastisol or water-based, we haven't talked about mixing colors, formulas, making colors. And recently I've gotten on this thing about color being an opinion, okay? Everybody in this room sees color differently. These lights will make us see color differently. We go outside, color's gonna look different. We get a true light box, color's gonna be different, And there's some people that are colorblind, unfortunately, and don't even know it, But at the end of the day, us as manufacturers, we do our best to get you as close to that Pantone color as possible. And personally, I have a love-hate relationship with Pantone, okay? I think this industry went about color the wrong way. There's no reason that we need to give our customers 3,000, 4,000 colors to choose from. That doesn't make sense to me, especially with all the variables we have, okay? So if you can, and I have a chart that I'm happy to share with you, and if any of you guys know Danny Gruinger from Denver, Colorado, he came up to me one day and said, Jesse, I just want these formulas for these 250 colors. These are my 250 standard colors. This is what I give my customers. I let them choose from here. If they want anything outside of this, I charge them extra, bottom line. Okay? So, especially with water-based, new for you, it's transparent, I say keep it simple, Don't make it too complicated. I know it looks nice to fan out that Pantone and be like, I can make any color you want. Yeah, right. It's not that easy, okay? As manufacturers, we have standards that we use to make those formulas. Understand what those standards are, because we don't have your equipment. We don't print like you do. We might not even print in your environment. So for us at Matsui, we keep it simple. We're right down the middle. Medium squeegee, a little bit of an angle, 160 mesh, standard mesh. We don't use thin thread standard because most of the people are using standard. Double stroke, minimal off contact. Just those little things there will help you understand that our formulas are geared to that, and that's when the color comes close. I get a lot of phone calls that say, hey, your colors are not matching. I go, well, they're not designed to match for you. They're designed with a certain standard, and then I find out they're using 230 mesh. Well, if you're using 230 mesh and I made the color with 160, there's no way it's going to match. So understanding how you need to make those adjustments when you do have to go to higher mesh or lower mesh. Okay? And it could be as simple as just going 1 or 2 shades darker. Because you're going to lay down less ink, so you have to go 1 or 2 shades darker. All right? So just something I want to throw out there, so you don't hang us for colors not matching, and start talking on the boards and being like, Matsui's formulas are horrible. No, it's not that. We make every effort to try to come as close as possible. It's your responsibility to make that adjustment in your shop. Okay? That's it, bottom line. So I don't want to get any phone calls saying your formulas are not working. I mean, unless it's really off, if it's a red and it turns blue, then yeah, there's a problem. Okay? But we clear? Does it make sense?